Hello everyone. We're just going to be talking about Iron Council for a little bit. So first we're going to watch Fusion do the fight and kind of give some commentary about what they're doing and why it's working.
5,
Sorry, this is not Fusion. This is Fusion.
4, 3, 3, 2, 1.
So there's three mobs. The one of the paladins, the prop pally, will take the big guy, and then their off tank, which is usually a feral druid, is going to be taking the two little guys. The first two phases are not DPS races. You can take your time, you can position, it doesn't really matter. But usually the first two guys will die around 2 minute 30 to 3 minutes, so you kind of want to make sure you have all your cooldowns back for the big guy.
Alright, here we go.
So the first kill target is the small guy, then middle guy, then big guy. The little guy has a bunch of stuff you need to interrupt. I don't know why this is in potato mode. So he'll be casting stuff. The DKs can take care of it, no big deal. You stack everything on top of each other. So the Rune Master has an ability called Rune of Power, and he casts it on one of these guys, and it increases whoever's in it increases their damage. That includes the mobs, that includes the players. So the goal is, if everything's stacked on top of each other, the Rune of Power will be on top of each other. So that way, you don't have to move the bosses too much. So if the big guy was over here and the Rune of Power gets cast over here, you have to drag everything over else. So it makes much more sense to just stack everything on top of each other. There's a Chain Lightning, it gets interrupted. There it is, the Rune of Power. It's a 1.5 second cast. It picks a mob, and it puts it on them. During this time, if you can put this guy on focus, you can actually start moving your guys away, so that way, because it's already picked a spot. And what you want to do is when you're moving these mobs is you move them out. And if you move them out too much, then you tangentially run towards the circle. That way you're not like closely potentially putting them back in. But this guy's, the most dangerous one are the Steelbreaker, because if he starts Fusion Punch while he's in the blue circle, you're going to have to use a shield wall or something. If the Stormcaller is doing his overcharge or then he needs to, you guys need to get out. So here the tank is positioning so that nothing is in the blue circle, only the players. And you notice how they're kind of just out on the outskirts so the melee can attack. It's very important. This tank positioning is super important, otherwise you're going to be spending forever in this fight. So far so easy, we haven't really, this tank during these fusion punches hasn't really been needing to use any cooldowns. No pain sups, no shield walls, nothing, because their damage right now is manageable. Still hits a lot, but manageable. So here's Overload. Overload is an ability. It will only get cast once if your DPS is half decent, and it's done by this guy, Stormcaller Brundir. Traditionally you run out because he stands still and casts it, but everybody else runs away. But the damage is super manageable. You just Divine Sack. So you just have a Paladin Divine Sack and you tank it. The only issue is if he does it while he's standing in the blue circle, it will kill everyone because it'll do a lot more damage.
Did you desack?
So he did not desack, I think, in this pull, but you take about half HP. If he desacked, it would have been like 7. People are at 70 HP, so it's just super manageable, not a big deal. So super easy, not a lot of mechanics right now.
Baron, can you desack the 2 to 3 transition? Vank, can you desack the first death rune?
You gotta readjust.
If I remember, sure.
Alright. Once Stormcaller dies, there's a couple of 2 new abilities they have to worry about. Rune Master gets something called Rune of Death. So far he's been doing Rune of Power, which is nice for us. Rune of Death is an instant, and he puts it, and it's a much bigger green circle, and it does a crap ton of damage. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you are spread out so that not the entire raid takes that damage. If you have an extra raid sack you want to use for it, then that's okay. And usually you'll get about 2. Okay, and then the other Steelbreaker gets another ability called Disruption. or static disruption. And what it does is it finds a ranged player, and will put the debuff on them. It like gives them a bunch of AoE damage, and then also will increase the nature damage taken by 75%. And there's whole sorts of nature damage being taken. Just a side note, you should have a nature resist totem nearby, or aspect of the wild. So what they do to manage this is that, when the Rune of Death cooldown is up, they do a loose spread so that if it gets cast on somebody, not everyone's getting hit. It's very tempting to stay in the Rune of Power to kill this guy, but the DPS does not matter. And the reason being is that you're going to have to throttle anyway to wait for a fresh rune. So you can drag him to 5%, wait for him to get a fresh Rune of Power, then kill him, so that you can meet the DPS check for Steelbreaker. So, if you try to optimize DPS, you're still going to have to take like 10-15 seconds to just not DPS them. So not a lot of points. It's much better to be safe. And usually the healers will be on the outskirts so that they can bait out the disruptions from Steelbreaker. So I'm going to wait till they get a disruption and show you what that looks like. So here they're just DPSing the second guy. Now every time one dies, there's a lot more damage by Steelbreaker. Here it is. So you see this little animation there. It's pretty hard to miss. So he'll does a little disruption, static disruption. It goes on this guy. When this guy gets it, notice how he's walking in. The reason being is that you can get 2 back to back. Obviously, very unlikely if you have this many ranged. But you don't want that risk. You will die. So you go into melee so that you no longer become eligible to get static disruption. So that's what he does. God bless him.
Spread out for Death Rune.
Okay. So far, so good. There's going to be fusion punches. They're still going to be okay to tank. I'm waiting for Rune of Death. There it is. So there's the Rune of Death here. It's this green circle. It gets cast on these 3 people. So they gotta run the fuck out.
Back to the power.
It does a lot of damage. So these blink. You can use your engineering rocket boots to get rid of them. To try to minimize that damage. Especially if it lands, because it can easily land on melee as well. So that's when it really starts hurting. A good time to use Trank Hymns from the Boomkin and Shadow Priest. It's just extra healing that helps. Again, not a DPS race. And then once this Rune of Death is down, you can drag him back to the blue circle just to optimize a little bit. But again, you're going to have to throttle at some point. If the timing works out, it works out, but it usually doesn't.
Watch it.
Yeah, slow DPS. We're gonna be here.
So here they're in a nice loose spread because they're waiting for a second Rune of Death, and then they're going to wait for a Rune of Power, then they're going to kill him. So nice spread here.
Stop you guys.
Now this guy gets static charge. He blocks it, so he doesn't need to do
Wrong
anything.
one.
Here's another Rune of Death. It's on Jordy, so he's going to... notice his health here. Look how much damage he's taking.
Death Rune.
This is with the
Step back
shield.
up, right?
He almost dies, right?
Yep.
So you got to run right away.
Just have
So now he's waiting for a
Just
Rune of
open
Power.
Any second.
So
Soakers
that
by
way he can
Skull.
There is the
Right
Rune of
here, let's
Power,
go.
and they're going to kill him. And everybody's going to run in, and they're
Gets
going to
upset.
lust.
In the hero.
Trying to get it right.
Any innervates?
There, stopping here.
He's got a pretty big hitbox, so it's kind of a tricky positioning. So you want to make sure that he's outside the blue circle because he will kill your tank immediately. And here you're gonna have to rotate cooldown. So if your Ardent Defender hasn't popped, you let Ardent Defender get the first fusion punch, then you shield wall, then you desack, and then you have soakers. So the best soakers are usually the healers, and they're usually the priests and resto druids because they can still heal and run. Here they use a whole bunch of soakers. I think for our strategy, we're going to use only 2 soakers. So you'll have the priest out. He gets static disruption. He moves in, and then the resto druid moves out. He gets the next one, and they just kind of do this little dance where they go, priest goes in, he gets the static, he goes in, resto druid goes out. Resto druid gets it. The nice thing about this, because it does do a lot of damage, so that way you can focus your shields and your hots on one player rather than it could be potentially like 3 or 4 and you don't know who. So the thing is about this as well is after a certain time, your main tank has a debuff that will just kill him. That's a planned death. And every time he dies, he gets healed and he takes more and does more damage. So what you want to do is get your off tank to tank. Before this happens, your off tank needs to taunt. Your paladin needs to run out because he does an explosion AoE, so he could potentially kill your other tank if he stands on top of him. And then he needs to have a soul stone or a B-res so that he could come back and be the third tank. Ideally, you do this after just two tank deaths, because otherwise the damage gets too rough. MS also helps. So if you have I think the best class to do it is a hunter that can do an aim shot.
There's nobody behind me. I have a way out. Got about 10 seconds.
So this is still the first tank. He's saying he's got about 10 seconds left on his meltdown. But their DPS is pumping.
Pentax go in.
And notice they still have the Rune of Power.
Fusion come back up.
All right, get ready, Negator. 3, 2, 1, take it.
Got it.
So he runs. His off tank taunts. Baron does a little S key towards there. Dies, explodes all alone, and then he should come back up with a scary amount of HP. The other thing here is super helpful is if you're going to use B-reses, the glyph that brings them back to full health is very helpful. So notice Steelbreaker gained a bunch of health.
The tail of the pack, make sure you're not
Send
too
it
fast.
Notice how they're doing these little dances. You get a static disruption, you go in.
Rest of the way, I'm not going to taunt. Just send it the rest of the way.
Let's
go.
go.
Yes.
Let's go.
Alright, cool. Alright, we're going to watch one more here.
Four, three, two, one.
So you'll notice that there's 8 warlocks here. Pretty nice. So again, they stack everything together. They're just DPSing Stormcaller. Not a lot of mechanics here again. There's a fusion punch. They're just going to eat that. They're going to interrupt. They move the dude away. Again, everything is stacked. The positioning is perfect. All these mobs are outside the blue circle. Everybody else gets in. And they're just pelting this guy. Is that an over? Yeah, there was an overload that they just completely ate. Traditionally, some people were running out. The healers were. But you don't need to. Just eat it. If you have some ability that produces damage like Fade or something, also help your healers. Power, you gotta move these guys out immediately. Sometimes this Rune of Power spawns while someone's already sitting in the blue circle doing a cast, whether it's a Stormcaller Chain Lightning or a Stormcaller Overload or a big guy Fusion Punch. It's super shitty RNG, doesn't happen very often, but it can happen. That's when you need to use your cooldowns and you need to react to it. It's kind of dangerous. So, first guy dies. The healers are spreading out first. The static disruption. So you have a Resto Druid, you have a Hunter, you have a Priest here. They're going to be the soakers. And mages are also good options because they can block it. So here this priest gets it and he runs in, so he no longer becomes a target. So once the second Root of Power hits, everybody says, fuck it, we're going to go spread, because that Root of Death is open. So there's another disruption. This guy needs to run in.
Resummon your pet now, though.
So notice, loose spread here. Not giant spread, just a loose spread. And they're going to be ready to use cooldowns and trank and stuff if Life of Death happens. They got super lucky with one that's kind of hits very little amount of people, but if it hits all the melee, you got to rocket boots away. Okay? You can use cooldowns. Health stones, tranks, all the stuff. So once Life of Death is done, or Rune of Death, sorry, I don't know why I said Life of Death. Rune of Death is done. You know, it has at least a 20 to 30 second timer before it can happen again. So you can drag them back to the blue circle for a little bit of optimization. But you'll notice even these guys with their DPS, they're gonna have to throttle.
Spread out, spread out, spread out.
So here they're saying spread because Rune of Death has not a lot of time left.
Just survive. No, no.
So the damage doesn't
No
matter.
dots, no dots.
Now, during this time, you actually can start setting up stuff on Steelbreaker. You can get your 5 Sunders up, you can get your dots up, you can stand in the blue circle, get a Curse of Doom so that it lands at the right time. You know, get the debuffs done and all that stuff, you know. Here's...
On the Rune of Power cast, we kill Rune Master.
So here they get out of this, they survive it. Wait till the Rune Master cats Rune of
Did he
Power.
Rune of Death right now? Okay.
Apparently he did not see the green
Suck.
circle. So because they're okay to stack because they just cast the Rune of Death. So this still has a bunch of timer, but he will cast a Rune of Power before he does Rune of Death, and you're gonna kill him. So you're not gonna worry about this third Rune of Death.
Ready to kill. On the cast, on the cast. Kill.
Here's the Rune of Power. And you're gonna kill him immediately.
Fast.
Drag this guy out.
Lost.
And then you're gonna lust. And now it's just a DPS race. And here what they do is actually they have, I think only one soaker, like I was saying. So they have just this priest, or just this druid right now. He's gonna get disruption. And he's gonna run in.
Yeah.
And somebody else is gonna run out. That's the hunter. So they have, you know. Then he's gonna run in, and somebody else is gonna run out. Because he got disruption. He just ran. The Shadow Priest runs out.
Oh, we're dumpstering him.
And here's the first tank. He's rocket booted away. This off tank is already taunted with the Feral Druid here. And then he
Can you PI me, Visa?
there's a fusion punch that needs a cooldown. Here's another disruption. So it's just kind of the same song and dance. Here, it doesn't matter about the mechanics as much. Like, you need to do it cleanly. Every single death will essentially be a wipe. If a non-tank planned death happens, he gains 25% more damage and he heals for 20% HP. So it could really set you back. So you want to make sure that you're not dying for any reason.
He's probably gonna heal again. Never mind. Kill.
And so here's the second tank running away, and then the third tank taunted. And this is usually if you have to heal one more time, you know, it could still be doable, but you don't want it any more than that. And that's pretty much it. Everybody has a special role. You know, if you're a
As
paladin,
soon as Order are opened on the PT,
if you're a paladin, you want to make sure you're using the raid sacks at the right time. So overload, Life of Deaths, or Rune of Deaths. If you're a disc priest, you want to PI on the phase 3 fusion punches. You want to hymn on Rune of Deaths. If you're supposed to be a soaker, you want to keep an eye if you get the static disruption. You either block it or you move back in so you don't get a second one. And if you're a tank, you're positioning. You know, 90% of this is like good positioning. So you want to make sure that none of these mobs cast an ability like Overload or Fusion Punch while they're in a blue bit. So you have a weak aura or something that can alert you to that. And that's it.